The stars above Altrian Prime burned red with the light of a dying world. Massive ships hung in the dark sky like metal mountains, their hulls so large they blocked out entire sections of the night. The Zephyrian Empire had come to another peaceful world, and like all the others before it, Altrian Prime would fall. Admiral Kefver stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. His reptilian face showed no emotion as he watched the planet below through the viewing screen. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were now covered in smoke. The tall, silver-skinned Altrians who had built those cities were being rounded up like animals and loaded onto transport ships. This was the way of the Empire. For 300 years, the Zephyrians had spread across the galaxy like a plague. They took what they wanted and enslaved what they found. No one could stop them. No one had ever even tried. Kefver had conquered 47 worlds in his long career. The Altrians were just another species to add to his list. Their technology was weak, their military almost non-existent. They had surrendered after only 3 days of fighting. Most species lasted longer than that. The Admiral turned away from the viewing screen. His aide, a younger Zephyrian named Vextar, approached with a datapad. The numbers were good. They had captured over 2 billion Altrians. Most would be sent to the mining worlds in the Outer Rim. The rest would work in the factories that built more ships for the Empire. Captain Jake Morrison was having a normal day when everything changed. He sat in the captain's chair of the U.S. Defiant, drinking his morning coffee and reading reports from the night shift. His ship was 3 months into a survey mission in what Earth Command called the Frontier Sector. It was quiet work, mapping new star systems and looking for planets that might be suitable for human colonies. The Defiant was not a warship. She was an exploration vessel, built for long journeys into unknown space. Her crew of 200 men and women was scientists, engineers, and explorers. They carried only light weapons for protection against pirates or hostile wildlife. Jake had been captain for 5 years, and the most exciting thing that had happened was discovering a new type of space whale near the Rigel system that changed when Lisa Hayes rushed onto the bridge. The young communications officer looked pale and frightened. She carried a datapad in her shaking hands and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Captain, you need to hear this," she said. "We're picking up transmissions from multiple systems. Distress calls. Hundreds of them." Jake set down his coffee cup and took the datapad. The screen showed wave patterns from dozens of different sources. Some were in languages the ship's computer recognized, others were completely unknown. But even without understanding the words, the tone was clear. These were cries for help. "How long have these been coming in?" Jake asked. "The computer shows." "The first signals started arriving 6 hours ago," Lisa replied. "But Captain, some of these signals are coming from systems over 50 light-years away. Whatever is happening out there, it's big." Jake called his senior staff to the conference room. Within minutes, the small space was filled with worried faces. Ryan Bell, his first officer, studied the communications data with a frown. Amanda Cole, the science officer, worked frantically on her tablet, trying to make sense of the alien languages. Tony Parker, the chief engineer, looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the galaxy. "Talk to me, people," Jake said. "What are we dealing with?" Amanda spoke first. "I've managed to translate portions of these messages. Captain, entire civilizations are under attack. The transmissions mention something called the Zephyrian Empire. Based on the descriptions, they have technology far beyond anything we've encountered." "How far beyond?" Jake asked. "Their ships are described as being the size of small moons. Their weapons can destroy continents. And according to these messages, they don't just conquer worlds, they enslave entire populations." The room fell silent. Jake looked around the table at his officers. These were good people, brave men and women who had volunteered to explore the unknown reaches of space. But they were explorers, not soldiers. "Sir," Ryan said quietly, "we have to consider our options here. The Defiant is one ship with a crew of 200. If these reports are accurate, we're talking about an empire that has conquered dozens of star systems. What are you suggesting, Commander?" Jake asked. "I'm suggesting we return to Earth immediately and report what we found. Let Earth Command decide how to handle this." Jake nodded slowly. It was the smart choice, the safe choice. But as he looked at the datapad showing those desperate transmissions, he thought about the beings who had sent them. Somewhere out there, entire species were crying out for help. How long would it take for Earth Command to organize a response? Months? Years? How many worlds would fall while humanity debated what to do? Dr. Kate Wilson, the ship's medical officer, had been quiet during the discussion. Now she leaned forward and spoke in her calm, steady voice. "Captain, I've been listening to these transmissions for the past hour. I don't understand the languages, but I recognize the emotions. These aren't just military distress calls. These are the voices of mothers calling for their children, of families being torn apart. Whatever is happening out there, it's not just conquest. It's genocide." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had joined the space service to explore new worlds and meet new species. The idea that some of those species might be suffering, while he sat safely in his conference room, made him feel sick. "Lisa," he said, "have you been able to pinpoint the source of the most recent transmissions?" The communications officer nodded. "The newest signals are coming from a system about 8 light years from here. The star charts show it as home to a species called the Altrians. Captain, the last transmission we received was 3 hours ago. Since then, nothing." Jake stood up and walked to the small window that looked out into space. The stars looked the same as always, cold and distant. But somewhere among those points of light, people were suffering. People were dying. And the Defiant was the only human ship within 100 light years. "Tony," he said without turning around, "how long would it take us to reach the Altrian?" "System?" The engineer checked his calculations. "At maximum speed, 18 hours, sir. And our weapons?" "We have defensive lasers and a small complement of torpedoes. Nothing designed for ship-to-ship combat against military targets." Jake turned back to face his officers. "I want everyone to understand something. If we go to the Altrian system, we may be flying into a situation we can't handle. We may not be coming back. I won't order anyone to follow me into what could be a suicide mission." He paused and looked each of them in the eye. "But I also won't sit here and do nothing while innocent people are being slaughtered. The Defiant may not be a warship, but we're the only help those people are going to get." Ryan Bell was the first to speak. "Sir, if you're going, then we're all going. That's what we signed up for when we joined this crew." One by one, the others nodded their agreement. Amanda Cole, the young science officer who had never seen combat, straightened her shoulders and said, "The Altrians sent those distress calls because they believed someone would hear them and care. We can't let them down." Jake felt a surge of pride in his crew. These people had volunteered to explore the unknown, and now they were volunteering to face something far more dangerous than uncharted space. They were choosing to stand up for people they had never met, people who might already be dead. "Very well," he said. "Lisa, send a message to Earth Command informing them of our situation and our intentions. Tony, I want maximum speed to the Altrian system. Everyone else, prepare your departments for possible combat." As his officers filed out of the conference room, Jake remained behind for a moment. Through the small window, the stars still looked cold and distant. But now he knew that somewhere among them, an empire of conquerors was spreading darkness. Across the galaxy, the UE's Defiant might be just one small ship, but sometimes one ship was enough to make a difference. Sometimes one ship was enough to bring hope to a hopeless situation. Jake Morrison just prayed they would arrive in time to save at least some of the people who had called out for help in the darkness of space. The Defiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Altrian system, and Jake Morrison felt his heart sink. The beautiful blue world he could see on the main screen was surrounded by ships that looked like floating cities. Each Zephyrian vessel was easily 10 times the size of his ship, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could turn the Defiant into space dust with a single shot. "My God," whispered Amanda Cole from her science station. "Captain, I'm reading over 30 major vessels in orbit around the planet. Some of them are larger than anything in our databases." Jake stood behind her chair, watching the sensor readings scroll across her screen. The numbers were terrifying. The smallest Zephyrian ship was twice the size of Earth's largest battleship. The biggest ones were so massive they had their own gravity fields. "What about the planet?" he asked quietly. Amanda's voice was barely audible. "I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the surface. Cities burning, sir. And there are transport ships moving between the planet and the larger vessels. They're taking people off the planet." Lisa Hayes turned from her communication station, tears streaming down her face. "I'm picking up transmissions from the surface. The translation is rough, but the Altrians are begging for help. They're being loaded onto ships like cargo." Jake felt anger rise in his chest. He had seen the aftermath of wars before, but this was different. This was not conquest, it was slavery. An entire civilization was being destroyed while he watched. "Sir," Ryan Bell said from his position beside the captain's chair, "we need to think about this carefully. If we move closer, they'll detect us. And once they do—" "I know, Ryan," Jake replied, "but we can't just watch this happen." Before anyone could respond, the ship's alert system activated. Lisa's hands flew over her console as multiple signals filled the communications array. "Captain, we're being hailed by the lead Zephyrian vessel. They've detected us." Jake straightened his uniform and nodded. "Put it on screen." The main viewer filled with the image of a creature that looked like it had stepped out of humanity's worst nightmares. Admiral Kethver was tall and covered in dark scales that seemed to absorb light. His eyes were yellow and cold, and when he spoke, his voice was like grinding metal. "Unknown vessel, you have entered space claimed by the Zephyrian Empire. Identify yourself immediately and prepare to be boarded for inspection." Jake looked around. The bridge at his crew. Tony Parker was pale as a ghost. Ben Carter, the security chief, had his hand on his weapon even though it would do no good against the massive ship surrounding them. But every one of them was looking at him with trust in their eyes. They believed in him, even now. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Defiant," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the communication system. "We are representatives of the human race, and we demand that you cease your hostile actions against the Altrian people immediately." The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Then Admiral Kethver made a sound that might have been laughter, if laughter could come from something so cold and terrible. "Human?" The alien said, "I am not familiar with your species, but it does not matter. You will surrender your vessel immediately, or you will be destroyed. You have 30 seconds to comply." Jake felt the eyes of his bridge crew on him. He could surrender and save their lives. The smart thing to do would be to apologize and retreat. But when he looked at the screen showing the blue world below, where millions of innocent people were being enslaved, he knew he could not back down. "Admiral Kethver," Jake said, reading the alien's name from the data Lisa had gathered. "I am going to say this once, and I want you to listen carefully. The human race does not negotiate with slavers and murderers. You will release the Altrian people immediately and withdraw from this system. This is your only warning. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion fell silent. Admiral Kefver stared at the small ship on his screen, trying to understand what he had just heard. In 300 years of conquest, no one had ever spoken to him like this. Species might beg for mercy or try to bargain for their lives, but no one had ever issued him an ultimatum. That his aide, Vextar, leaned close to his chair. Admiral, our sensors show their ship is primitive. Their weapons are barely adequate for asteroid mining. Should we destroy them now? Kefver held up a scaled hand for silence. He was curious about these humans. Their ship was indeed primitive, no threat to his mighty fleet. But their captain had just threatened the Zephyrian Empire with what appeared to be complete seriousness. Either these humans were completely insane, or they knew something he did not. Tell me about their species, he ordered. Vextar consulted his datapad. Unknown, sir. This is our first contact with them. Their technology appears to be several centuries behind ours. The ship carries minimal weapons and no significant defenses. Yet their captain threatens us, Kefver mused. Interesting. Very well. Send Captain Zexner in the Razor's Edge to destroy them. But first, scan their vessel thoroughly. I want to know everything about these humans before they die. On the bridge of the Defiant, Jake watched as one of the smaller Zephyrian ships began moving toward them. It was still 3 times the size of his vessel, and his sensors showed it carried enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. Captain, Amanda said urgently, the approaching ship is powering up weapons. We have maybe 2 minutes before they're in firing range. Tony, how are our engines? Jake asked. Running at peak efficiency, sir. But Captain, we can't outrun them. Their ship is faster than ours. Jake nodded and turned to his tactical officer, Sam Rivers. The young man had been quiet since they entered the system, but now his eyes were bright with concentration. Sam, I need options. Can we fight that ship? Sam looked at his tactical display and then at his captain. Sir, in a straight fight, they'll destroy us in seconds. But if we don't fight them straight. He paused, his fingers dancing over his controls. Captain, their ship is built for fighting other large vessels. It's designed to exchange fire with opponents of similar size and power. But we're small and maneuverable. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that sometimes being the underdog is an advantage. They expect us to either run or stand still and shoot. If we do neither. Jake felt a small smile cross his face. Do it. The Razor's Edge approached the human vessel with the confidence of a predator stalking wounded prey. Captain Vexmore had destroyed hundreds of ships in his career. This small vessel would be no different. His crew was relaxed, already planning how they would spend their shore leave after this easy victory. Target their engines first, Vexmore ordered. The Admiral wants to study them before they die. But as his ship closed the distance, something unexpected happened. The human vessel, instead of trying to flee or turning to fight, suddenly accelerated directly toward them. Collision course, his navigator shouted. Impossible, Vexmore snarled. They're committing suicide. But at the last possible second, the human ship rolled to one side and passed beneath the Razor's Edge, so close that their shields actually touched. As it passed, the human ship fired a concentrated burst of energy into the Zephyrian vessel's forward shield generator. The effect was immediate. The Razor's Edge shuddered as its primary defenses flickered and died. Before Vexmore could react, the human ship was behind them, firing precisely targeted shots at their engine systems. Return fire! He screamed, but the human ship was moving in ways that defied tactical logic. It spun and twisted through space like a living thing, always staying just out of reach of the Razor's Edge's main weapons. And every time it moved, it fired another surgical strike at a critical system. Within minutes, the mighty Zephyrian warship was drifting helpless in space, its engines dead and its weapons offline. The crew was unconscious from a gas leak caused by damage to their life support systems. They were alive but completely helpless. On the bridge of the Defiant, Jake watched the disabled enemy ship with satisfaction. Sam Rivers had done the impossible, using their small size and superior maneuverability to defeat a vastly superior opponent. But Jake knew this was only the beginning. "Open a channel to the entire Zephyrian fleet," he ordered, when Lisa nodded. That the channel was open, Jake spoke with quiet confidence. "This is Captain Morrison. The ship you just sent to destroy us is now drifting powerless in space. Its crew is alive but unconscious. Any other vessel that approaches us will meet the same fate. Admiral Kethver, I am now going to repeat my earlier demand. Release the Altrian people and withdraw from the system immediately. You have seen what one human ship can do. Do not make the mistake of thinking we are weak." The communication channel closed, leaving the bridge in silence. Jake looked around at his crew, all of whom were staring at him with a mixture of awe and terror. They had just defeated a warship that should have destroyed them easily. But they all knew that the real test was yet to come, on the Eternal Dominion. Admiral Kethver stared at his tactical display in complete disbelief. The Razor's Edge, one of his most powerful ships, was showing as completely disabled. The small human vessel hung in space nearby, apparently undamaged. "How is this possible?" he whispered. Vextar was frantically checking sensor readings. "Sir, the human ship used tactics we've never encountered. They turned our ship's size Admiral Kethver paced the bridge of his flagship like a caged animal. The tactical display showed the Razor's Edge still drifting helpless in space, a constant reminder that these unknown humans had done something impossible. In 300 years of conquest, no enemy had ever disabled one of his ships without destroying it completely. "Status report on Captain Dexmoor's vessel," he ordered. His communications officer, a nervous young Zephyrian named Dexrin, checked his instruments. "Sir, the crew is beginning to wake up. Their life support has been restored, but engines and weapons remain offline. They report that the humans used some kind of gas weapon that knocked them unconscious without permanent harm." Kethver stopped, pacing. Without permanent harm? They could have destroyed the ship easily, but instead they chose to disable it and spare the crew. "Yes, sir. Captain Dexmoor says the human weapons were precise beyond anything he has ever seen. They targeted specific systems to disable the ship without causing casualties." The Admiral stared at the small human vessel on his screen. Every instinct told him to destroy it immediately, to wipe out this threat before it could do more damage. But something held him back. These humans fought like no species he had ever encountered. They showed mercy to defeated enemies, something the Zephyrian Empire had not experienced in centuries. "Sir," Vextar approached cautiously, "perhaps we should study them further before taking action. Their tactics are unlike anything in our military databases." Kethver nodded slowly. "Prepare Battle Group 7 for deployment, 12 heavy cruisers and 30 fighters. If these humans think they can challenge the Empire with one small ship, we will show them the price of defiance." On the bridge of the Defiant, Jake Morrison watched the enemy fleet repositioning through the main view screen. His sensors showed massive ships moving into attack formation, enough firepower to destroy a dozen vessels like his own. "Captain," Amanda Cole reported. From her science station, "I'm reading 12 heavy cruisers and 30 smaller vessels moving to surround us. Their combined firepower is, well, it's impossible to calculate how outgunned we are." Tony Parker looked up from his engineering console, sweat beading on his forehead. "Sir, our last engagement pushed our systems to the limit. The power couplings are stressed, and our shield generators are running at 90% efficiency. We took more damage than we let on." Jake nodded grimly. He had expected this response from the Zephyrians. They had been embarrassed by the defeat of one of their ships, and now they were bringing overwhelming force to bear. The smart thing to do would be to retreat, to live to fight another day. But the smart thing would also mean abandoning the Altrian people to slavery. Options? He asked his senior staff. Ryan Bell studied the tactical display with a frown. Honestly, sir, there aren't many. We're completely surrounded. Even if we could disable a few more ships, there are too many of them. Eventually, they'll overwhelm us through sheer numbers. Dr. Kate Wilson, who rarely spoke during tactical discussions, cleared her throat softly. Captain, I've been monitoring communications from the planet's surface. The Altrians know what's happening up here. They're calling us their salvation, the answer to their prayers. If we retreat now... I know, Doctor, Jake said quietly. But if we stay, we might not be able to help anyone. Sam Rivers, the young tactical officer who had won their first impossible victory, was studying his instruments with intense concentration. Captain, what if we don't fight them the way they expect us to fight? Explain. Sam stood up and moved to the main tactical display. Look at their formation, sir. They're arranged for maximum firepower concentration, designed to destroy us quickly and efficiently. But they're thinking like they're fighting another fleet, not a single small ship. He traced patterns on the display with his finger. There. Ships are big and powerful, but they're also slow to maneuver. If we can get inside their formation, make them fire at us while we're close to their own ships. You're talking about using their ships as shields against each other, Ryan said, his eyes widening. Exactly. And more than that. If we can create a cascade failure, make them hit each other while trying to hit us, we might be able to turn their superior numbers against them. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. These people had volunteered for a survey mission, not a suicide mission. But every face he saw showed the same determination he felt in his own heart. Do it, he said. The Battle Group 7 approached. The human vessel with the confidence of overwhelming superiority. Admiral Zarkov, commanding the operation from the heavy cruiser Dominator, had fought in dozens of battles across the galaxy. He had never encountered an enemy that could survive. The combined firepower of 12 heavy warships. All ships maintain formation, he ordered. We will destroy the human vessel quickly and return to the subjugation of the planet below. But as his ships closed in, the small human vessel did something completely unexpected. Instead of trying to escape or turning to face the nearest enemy, it accelerated directly toward the center of the Zephyrian formation. It's a suicide run, his tactical officer reported. The humans are trying to ram us. Let them come, Zarkov replied. All ships, prepare to fire on my command. The Defiant streaked toward the center of the enemy formation like a missile. On her bridge, Sam Rivers watched his tactical display with absolute focus. Timing would be everything. Too early, and the enemy would have time to adjust. Too late, and they would be destroyed before they could execute their plan. Steady, Jake said calmly, though his knuckles were white as he gripped his chair. Hold course. The Zephyrian ships opened fire simultaneously, dozens of energy beams converging on the space where the Defiant should have been. But at the last possible second, Sam rolled the ship into a spiraling dive that took them beneath the enemy formation. The energy beams, no longer having a target, continued on their paths. Several struck Zephyrian ships that had been positioned directly opposite each other. Shields flared and hull plating melted as the aliens' own weapons' fire damaged their vessels. Impossible! Zarkov shouted as his sensors showed damage to 3 of his ships. How did they ... But the human ship was not finished. As it passed through the formation, it fired precisely targeted shots at the power couplings of the nearest vessels. The shots were not powerful enough to destroy the massive ships, but they caused critical systems to overload. The first heavy cruiser, the Annihilator, suffered a cascade failure in its main power grid. Emergency lighting flickered on as primary. Systems went offline. The second ship, Death's Hand, lost its navigation control and began drifting into the path of its companion vessel. All ships break formation. Zarketh ordered desperately, but breaking formation in the middle of a coordinated attack created its own problems. Ships that had been positioned for maximum firepower efficiency suddenly found themselves in each other's way. When they tried to track the fast-moving human vessel, their weapons targeting systems could not distinguish between the small enemy ship and their own larger vessels. Defiant danced through the chaos like a bird among elephants. Sam Rivers had turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. The Zephyrian ships were too big, too slow, and too numerous. Every time they tried to target the human ship, they risked hitting each other. Fire control is impossible. Sir, the tactical officer on the Dominator reported. The human ship is moving too fast and too close to our own vessels. If we fire, we'll hit our own ships. Zarketh watched in growing horror as his battle group fell apart. The human ship had not destroyed a single vessel, but half his formation was now disabled or damaged by friendly fire. Ships that had operated as a unified force for decades were now colliding with each other, or drifting helplessly with dead engines. On the bridge of the Defiant, the crew watched their impossible victory unfold on the main screen. They had faced odds of over 42-1 and somehow emerged victorious. But Jake Morrison felt no joy in the victory, only grim satisfaction. "Open a channel to the Zephyrian flagship," he ordered. When the channel opened, Jake looked directly into Admiral Kethver's yellow eyes. "Admiral, you have now seen what happens when you underestimate humanity. Your battle group is disabled, but your crews are alive. We could have destroyed every one of your ships, but we chose not to. This is your final warning. Release the Altrian people and withdraw from this system, or face the consequences." Kethver stared at the human captain for a long moment. Around him, his bridge crew waited in tense silence. Finally, the Admiral spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "What manner of beings are you?" "We are people who believe that might does not make right," Jake replied. "We are people who will not stand by while others suffer. And we are people who will fight against impossible odds, if that is what justice requires." The channel closed, leaving the bridge of the Eternal Dominion in stunned silence. Admiral Kethver looked at his tactical display, showing 12 of his finest ships either disabled or damaged by a single small vessel. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something that no Zephyrian commander had experienced. In 300 years of conquest, he felt defeated, but more than that, he felt curiosity. These humans had shown mercy to enemies who would have shown them none. They had fought with honor in Aga. The news of Battle Group 7's defeat spread through the Zephyrian fleet like wildfire. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Kethver stood in silence as report after report came in. 12 heavy cruisers disabled. 30 fighters scattered and powerless, all defeated by a single small ship that should not have been able to scratch their paint. "Sir," Vextar approached with a communication pad, his voice trembling. "The High Command is demanding an immediate explanation. They want to know how an entire battle group was defeated by one primitive vessel." Kethver took the pad and read the angry messages from his superiors. The language was harsh, questioning his competence and threatening court-martial. But what bothered him more than their anger was their complete inability to understand what they were facing. "They think this is a normal military failure," he said quietly. "They do not understand that we are dealing with something entirely new." On the disabled ships floating around them, emergency crews worked desperately to restore power and life support. The humans had struck with surgical precision, damaging exactly the right systems to disable each vessel without destroying. It was a level of tactical skill that went beyond military training. It was art. "Admiral," his communications officer called out urgently, "we're receiving a transmission from the High Command Fleet. Admiral Supreme Voxtar is ordering the immediate deployment of the Reserve Armada." Kethver felt his blood turn cold. The Reserve Armada was the largest military force the Empire had ever assembled. 500 ships of various classes, including the massive super dreadnoughts that were the pride of the Zephyrian fleet. It was enough firepower to destroy entire star systems. When will they arrive? He asked. 12 hours, sir. Kethver looked at the small human ship on his screen. In 12 hours, this brave little vessel and its crew would face destruction on a scale that no single ship could possibly survive. The thought should have pleased him, but instead it filled him with something he had never felt before: regret. On the defiant, Jake Morrison sat in his ready room, staring at a cup of coffee that had long since grown cold. Through his small window, he could see the disabled Zephyrian ships hanging in space like wounded giants. His crew had achieved 2 impossible victories, but he knew their luck could not last forever. A soft chime announced someone at his door. "Come in," he called. Dr. Kate Wilson entered, carrying her medical scanner and a worried expression. "Captain, I've finished examining the crew. We're all suffering from stress and fatigue, but everyone is still fit for duty. However, I'm more concerned about the psychological impact of what we're doing." Jake looked up at her. "Explain." "We're asking ordinary people to face impossible odds and somehow find a way to win. Sam Rivers hasn't slept in 18 hours. Tony Parker's hands shake every time he runs a diagnostic. Lisa Hayes jumps at every communication alert." She paused. "They're holding up well, but they're human. They have limits. And you think we're approaching those limits? I think we passed them 12 hours ago. What's keeping everyone going now is pure willpower and faith in you." Jake stood up and walked to his window. "Faith in me? Doctor, I'm making this up as I go along. We're one small ship against an empire that has conquered half the galaxy. By any reasonable measure, we should have been destroyed hours ago." Kate sat down in the chair across from his desk. "That's exactly why they have faith in you, Captain. You're not following any tactical manual or strategic doctrine. You're doing what you think is right, regardless of the odds. That means something to people." Before Jake could respond, his communicator chirped. Ryan Bell's voice came through. Clearly, "Captain, please report to the bridge immediately. We have a situation." Jake and Dr. Wilson hurried to the bridge, where they found the senior staff gathered around the main tactical display. The screen showed long-range sensor readings of something that made Jake's heart sink. "Report," he ordered. Amanda Cole looked up from her science station, her face pale. "Captain, long-range sensors are detecting a massive fleet approaching our position. 500 ships of various classes, including vessels larger than anything we've seen so far. How long until they arrive?" "At their current speed, approximately 11 hours and 43 minutes. Jake studied the sensor readings in silence. 500 ships. Even if every single one of them was only the size of the vessels they had already defeated, the numbers were overwhelming. But the readings showed that many of these ships were much larger, including several that dwarfed even the massive Zephyrian vessels currently orbiting the planet. Options?" he asked quietly. The bridge fell silent. Sam Rivers, who had found miraculous solutions to impossible problems twice before, stared at his tactical display with the look of a man who had finally encountered an obstacle he could not overcome. "Sir," Tony Parker said carefully, "even if we could disable 10 ships for everyone they disable, we'd still be outnumbered 50 to 1. And that's assuming we can maintain our current success rate, which—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Which is impossible," Ryan Bell completed. "Captain, I think it's time to consider withdrawal. We've done more than anyone could have expected. Maybe it's time to live to fight another day." Jake nodded slowly. It was the sensible choice, the reasonable choice. They had already accomplished the impossible twice. No one could fault them for retreating in the face of overwhelming odds. But as he looked at the Communications display showing continued transmissions from the planet's surface. He thought about the millions of Altrians who were counting on them. People who had lived under Zephyrian oppression for days now, who had seen their liberators arrive only to watch them leave when the real test came. "Lisa," he said quietly, "can you patch me through to the planet's surface?" "Yes, sir." There are several resistance groups still maintaining hidden transmitters. "Do it." The main screen shifted to show a grainy image of an Altrian hiding in what appeared to be a damaged building. The alien's silver skin was marked with bruises, and his large eyes were filled with exhaustion and pain. "This is Captain Morrison of the human vessel Defiant," Jake said. "I need you to understand our situation. A massive enemy fleet is approaching, more ships than we can possibly fight. If we stay, we will almost certainly be destroyed. If we leave now, we can return later with reinforcements." The Altrian's expression did not change. When he spoke, his voice was weak but steady. "Captain Morrison, my name is Veltar. I am what remains of our planetary council. In the past 3 days, we have watched our world burn and our people taken. As slaves, we had given up hope until your ship arrived." He paused, coughing weakly. "You have already done more than we dared to dream. You have shown the galaxy that the Zephyrian Empire can be defeated. If you must leave to save your crew, we understand. But please remember us. Remember that we died free because of what you did here." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in complete silence. Jake stared at the blank screen for a long moment, then looked around at his crew. These people had followed him into an impossible situation, trusting his judgment even when that judgment seemed to lead only to destruction. "I'm going to be honest with you," he said quietly. "If we stay and fight this fleet, we will probably die. Our ship will be destroyed, and everything we've accomplished here will be meaningless. The smart thing, the sensible thing, is to retreat." He paused, looking each of his officers in the eye. "But if we leave, millions of innocent people will remain slaves. The Zephyrian Empire will continue to spread across the galaxy, and eventually, they will find Earth. When that happens, our children and grandchildren will face the same choice we face now." Ben Carter, the security chief who had been quiet throughout the discussion, stepped forward. "Captain, I've been thinking about something Dr. Wilson said earlier, about faith. The Altrians have faith in us, yes. But more than that, they have faith in what we represent. The idea that someone, somewhere, will stand up to bullies and tyrants." He looked around the bridge. "If we run now, we're not just abandoning the Altrians. We're abandoning that idea. We're telling the galaxy that when things get too hard, humans give up." Amanda Cole nodded slowly. "Then's right. We're not just representing ourselves anymore. We're representing humanity. And if we're going to represent our species, shouldn't we represent the best of what humanity can be?" One by one, the other officers voiced their agreement. Tony Parker, who had been terrified throughout their ordeal, straightened his shoulders and said, "I'd rather die trying to do the right thing than live knowing I ran away when people needed help." Jake felt a surge of pride in his crew that almost overwhelmed him. These people were choosing almost certain death because they believed it was the right thing to do. They were choosing to make their last stand here, in orbit around a world they had never seen before today, for people they had never met. "Very well," he said. "We stay and fight. Tony, I want every system pushed beyond maximum efficiency. Amanda, I need a complete tactical analysis of the approaching fleet. Sam, start working on battle plans. I know the odds are impossible, but if anyone can find a way to make the impossible happen, it's this crew." As his officers scattered to their tasks, Jake remained on the bridge, staring out at the stars. In a few hours, those stars would be filled with enemy S. The reserve armada arrived like a storm of metal and death. 500 ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their massive hulls blotting out the stars. At their head flew the supreme dreadnought Galactic Dominion, a ship so large it had cities built into its hull. Admiral Supreme Voxtar commanded from its bridge, his ancient eyes filled with cold fury. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the impossible fleet spread across space around them. The tactical display showed numbers that made no sense. Even the smallest ships in the Armada were larger than his vessel. The biggest ones were like floating mountains, bristling with enough weapons to destroy entire fleets. "Sir," Amanda Cole said quietly, "I'm reading energy signatures. Unlike anything in our databases. Some of those ships are generating power levels equivalent to small stars." Jake nodded calmly. He had made peace with their situation hours ago. They would die here, but they would die fighting for something worthwhile. "All hands, this is the Captain, battle stations." Throughout the ship, 200 men and women moved to their positions with quiet determination. They were explorers, scientists, and engineers who had never expected to fight a war. But they had chosen to stand here, at the edge of known space, making their last stand for people they barely knew, on the Galactic Dominion. Admiral Supreme Voxtar studied this small human vessel with contempt. 300 years of conquest had made him arrogant. He had destroyed countless worlds and enslaved billions of beings. One tiny ship would not even slow him down. "Signal all ships," he ordered. "Destroy the human vessel. I want nothing left but space dust." But before his fleet could fire, something unexpected happened. Admiral Kethver's voice came across the communication channels, broadcasting to every ship in the Armada, "All vessels, hold your fire. I request permission to speak with Admiral Supreme Voxtar." The Supreme Admiral's scaled face twisted with anger. "Admiral Kethver, you will explain your interference immediately." "Sir, I must speak with you privately about these humans. There are things about this situation that you do not understand." Minutes later, Kethver stood in the Supreme Admiral's private chamber aboard the Galactic Dominion. The room was filled with trophies from conquered worlds, reminders of the Empire's 3 centuries of domination. But Kethver no longer looked at them with pride. "Explain yourself," Voxtar demanded. "Sir, these humans are not like any species we have encountered. They fight with honor, showing mercy to defeated enemies. They risk their lives not for conquest, but to protect others. In all my years of service, I have never seen anything like them." "You speak as if this is something to admire," Voxtar sneered. "Honor and mercy are weaknesses. The strong take what they want from the weak. This is the way of the universe. Is it?" Kethver asked quietly. "Sir, I have conquered 47 worlds in my career. I have enslaved billions of beings. I always believed it was necessary, that we were bringing order to chaos. But watching these humans fight, seeing how they value the lives of strangers above their own safety, it has made me question everything." Voxtar's eyes blazed with fury. "You question the Empire. You question 3 centuries of glorious conquest. I question whether what we call glory is actually just cruelty." The Supreme Admiral struck Kethver across the face with his scaled hand. "You are relieved of command. Guards will escort you to the detention cells. When we return to the homeworld, you will face charges of treason." As guards moved to arrest him, Kethver looked one last time at the trophy surrounding them. "Sir, before you destroy the human ship, I urge you to listen to what they have to say. They offer something our empire has never known, the chance to choose cooperation over conquest." "Remove him," Voxtar ordered coldly. On the bridge of the Defiant, Jake watched as energy readings spiked across the enemy fleet. They were preparing to fire, to end this confrontation with overwhelming force. He thought about his crew, about the families they would never see again, about the Earth they would never return to. "Captain," Lisa Hayes said urgently, "I'm receiving a transmission from Admiral Kethver." It's coming from inside the enemy flagship. Put it on screen. Kethver's face appeared, transmitted from what looked like a detention cell. His uniform was torn and his face bore fresh bruises. Captain Morrison, I tried to convince my superiors to listen to reason, but they refuse. Admiral Supreme Voxtar has ordered your destruction. We expected as much, Jake replied. But thank you for trying. There is something else you should know. Word of your actions here has spread throughout our fleet. Many of my officers are beginning to question orders they have followed without thought for centuries. You have planted seeds of doubt in minds that have never known doubt. The transmission cut off abruptly. Jake turned to his crew, seeing the same quiet resolve in their faces that he felt in his own heart. Well, people, this is it. Sam, do we have any options at all? Sam Rivers studied his tactical display one last time. Sir, there are too many of them. Even if we could somehow disable 50 ships, there would still be 450 left. The math just doesn't work. Then we do what we came here to do, Jake said. We make our stand. All ships, this is Captain Morrison of the United Earthship Defiant. You have 10 seconds to begin withdrawing from this system, or we will be forced to take action. The response from the Galactic Dominion was immediate and predictable. Admiral. Supreme Voxtar-S voice boomed across the communication channels. Primitive humans, you will surrender immediately or be destroyed. You face the full might of the Zephyrian Empire. Resistance is futile. Then we choose to be futile, Jake replied calmly. What happened next would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. As the reserve armada prepared to fire, something unprecedented occurred. On ship after ship throughout the fleet, crew members began to hesitate. Communications officers delayed transmitting firing orders. Weapons officers questioned targeting solutions. Engineers reported sudden malfunctions in critical systems. The seed of doubt that Kethver had spoken of was spreading like wildfire through the fleet. Soldiers who had never questioned orders in their lives suddenly found themselves wondering if what they were doing was right. They had watched the humans fight with honor and mercy, values that had been bred out of Zephyrian society centuries ago. On the heavy cruiser Eternal Victory, Captain Mordak stared at his firing controls. His orders were clear: destroy the human ship. But his mind kept returning to the reports of how the humans had disabled Zephyrian vessels without killing their crews. When was the last time anyone had shown such mercy to an enemy? Sir, his weapons officer said hesitantly, targeting computers are ready. Mordak Shand hovered over the firing control. One press of a button would end the lives of 200 brave beings who had risked everything to protect strangers. Stand down weapons, he said quietly. Sir, you heard me. Stand down weapons. Similar scenes played out across dozens of ships. Captains who had served the Empire faithfully for decades suddenly found themselves unable to fire on an enemy that had shown them more honor than their own leaders ever had. Admiral Supreme Voxtar watched his tactical display in growing fury. As ship after ship reported weapons malfunctions or targeting failures, what is happening? He roared. His aide, a young officer named Texver, approached carefully. Sir, it appears that many ships are experiencing difficulties with their firing systems. Difficulties? Or mutiny? Before Texver could answer, the communication system activated. Captain Mordaka's voice came through clearly. Admiral Supreme Voxtar, this is Captain Mordak of the Eternal Victory. I am formally refusing to fire on the human vessel. One by one, other captains joined him. Captain Zulkar of the Iron Fist refusing to fire. Captain Dex Moran of the Star Crusher refusing to fire. The list grew longer as officers throughout the fleet made the same choice. Voxtar stared at his communications display in shock. In 300 years of Empire history, nothing like this had ever happened. His own officers were openly defying his orders, choosing to side with an enemy over their own command structure. "This is treason," he screamed. "I will have you all executed." But his threats fell on deaf ears. The rebellion was spreading too fast to stop. Ship after ship declared their refusal to fire on the humans. Some went further, announcing their withdrawal from the Empire entirely. On the bridge of the Defiant, Jake and his crew watched in amazement as the massive enemy fleet began to break apart. Ships that had been preparing to destroy them were now moving away, their captains declaring independence from the empire that had ruled them for centuries. "I don't understand," Amanda Cole said, staring at her sensors. "What's happening to them?" Dr. Kate Wilson, who had been monitoring the alien communications, looked up with tears in her eyes. "They're choosing freedom over obedience. We didn't just fight their ships, we fought their ideas. And ideas, once planted, are harder to kill than any fleet." The final act came when Admiral Kethfer, freed by his own guards who had joined the rebellion, appeared on the bridge of the Galactic Dominion. Admiral Supreme Voxtar faced him with rage and disbelief. "You have destroyed everything we built," Voxtar said. "No," Kethfer replied. "We have become something better. The humans showed us that strength should protect the weak, not prey.